Great, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the August 1st meeting of the Government Operations Committee. Thank you all for being here.
Wouldn't miss it.
Well, good. I appreciate that. As we all know, this is the best committee. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Anybody? Nope. Comments from the public? Don't see any public. Minutes approval from our July 15th meeting, which was only a couple weeks ago. Can I have somebody move that? Greg moves, Susan seconds. Any questions or comments? Changes? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, we are going to dive right in with Jay Franklin from Assessment, and we have several things to talk about. Welcome, Jay.
Good morning, everyone.
I'll turn it over to you. Start wherever you like.
Well, let's just start with our normal every year resolution. So I have two resolutions here. One's to adopt our footings and one to adopt our equalization rate. This is the time of the year that I get to say that we're doing it this way because we've always done it this way. So we have 54 years of history of this format. I'm resisting to change it just in case that one person wants to go back and aggregate all of this data at some point. So, but it's just a way to have a snapshot of the 2024 final assessment roll.
Rich.
I was going to move the resolution on the equalization rates.
Great. Seconded by Greg. Okay. Any questions or comments about this? We do this every year.
Yeah, so this is after New York State takes a look at our assessment roll. They verify that all of the changes we made for 2024 are accurate, that we adjusted subject properties at the same rate as sale properties so that we're not sales chasing, and this just confirms that our 2024 assessment roll was at 100% of market value.
All right. I don't see any questions or comments. We ready to vote? All right, all in favor? That's unanimous, thank you. Why don't we go ahead and move the next one, adoption of 2024 assessment roll footings, ID 12603. Can somebody move that? Rich moves, seconded by Greg, thank you. Jay?
Yep, nothing to add on that one.
Questions, comments? All right, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor? That's unanimous, thank you. All right, and then we have a resolution urging New York State to pass an assessment cycle bill, ID 12606. Can somebody move that? Susan, seconded by Rich.
For discussion, I'm not sure how I'll vote on this because I'd like to hear more.
Yep.
So this is, I've been batting around since February. After talking, once we released our preliminary assessment roll, obviously we've had a lot of discussion on this and talking, hearing comments from some legislators, hearing comments from the public, and the misconceptions about our annual reassessment program and what everybody in most other people in the states do of not reassessing every single year and going to some sort of fractional assessment process. So I came up with, I wanted to look at what's the most explainable way to do this without jeopardizing equity on our assessment roll so that the public knows what the process is going to be each year. They don't have to go out to their mailbox and wonder if they're going to get an assessment change note in February or March of this year. And they'll be able to know that every 4 years will be that revaluation. The key here, so right now our annual reassessment program, we adjust our values annually to fair market value. If we didn't do that under New York State's current real property tax law, we would still have to value all real property at a uniform percentage of value. So if the market went up 10%, rather than increasing everyone's assessment by 10%, our level of assessment would go from 100% to 90%. So in effect, we would be changing everyone's market value by that 10% figure without notifying them of that fact. And that's what we did in 2006 and 2007. Very confusing to the public, very not transparent by being able to change everyone's value. And that's just something we can't get away from. We can't just say we're gonna value at 100% and not change values, because New York State verifies our assessment roll and measures it. The equalization rate's important for here, especially for school districts that cross county boundary lines. So that if one place is assessing at 50% of value and we're assessing at 100%, the same tax rate isn't applied to both parcels. So in Ithaca City School District, there's parcels in Richford and Candor. They have a higher tax rate than we do because they're at 78 and 72% of value. So their tax rate's that proportionately higher to make sure that taxes are equalized. So without a change, we can't get away from fractional assessments. Fractional assessments are not transparent. So I just want to stop there and see if kind of everyone's understanding that process.
Somewhat.
So since fractional assessments are just confusing, not transparent, what can we do to get around that? So we could do a 4-year assessment cycle. This freezes the valuation date. So if we did a revaluation in 2024, we would freeze the valuation date as of July 1 of 2023. Any new property that comes onto the market, any physical change that happened would be valued as of July 1 of 2023. Then once we get to the 25, 6, 7, the 2028 assessment roll, we do a revaluation, and then it's based upon the value as of July 1 of 2027. The nice thing about this is we know what the work we're gonna have to do for each year. In year 1, you do a cleanup from what you did during the revaluation. Year 2, you start preparing for what you need to do. Are there any other projects? Is there any data items you need to recollect? Years 3 and 4, you actually do the revaluation. So it's a nice set work of what we need to do for that year. As it stands for this process right now with annual, I don't know the work we're gonna need to do until June, July, when we start doing it. Because once we get all of our sales processed, then I can run our sales ratio, figure out where our level of assessment is and what work we need to do for the year. In most years, it was, you kind of knew what you were gonna have to do, but in this market, this market today was pretty easy. We know we're gonna have to revalue everyone. So it was kind of a struggle of knowing what we need to do. And if we need to do something in July and our budget is submitted the year before in July, it's hard to measure up with knowing what we need to do, ramping up staffing, ramping down staffing. It's just easier to know this is your workload as opposed to having widely fluctuating workloads from one year to the next. Granted, we can always find things to do because we've always put projects on the back burner, so it's not like we're twiddling our thumbs, but just waiting to see what our annual work is in order to get to our building permits, our sales, and all of that good stuff. So, the annual reassessment is more of the abnormal than the norm. In my memo, I gave you how many states do or how many states have a mandated reassessment cycle. New York State is one that doesn't have a mandated reassessment cycle. There is no teeth in what New York State does. So when New York State says you have to assess at a uniform percentage of market value, if a place doesn't do that, there isn't any mechanism for the state to say you need to do a revaluation like there is in Vermont or North Carolina. So we look to the IAAO, the International Association of Assessing Officers, for standards. They have a coefficient of dispersion, how far on average you are off from that sale price. They like to see it under 15%. We've run around 11% over the last 9 years, so we're kind of within that. In New York State, we had 397 assessing units complete a reappraisal in 2023, so about 40% of the assessing units. For the places who don't reassess, where are we? Only 11% of the assessing units met the COD guideline for residential parcels, and 34% met it for all of their parcels. So if you aren't doing a reappraisal, you're not staying uniform according to industry standards. You're really deviating from that. I took a look at one of our neighbors to Tioga County. If you were in the town of Barton, your assessment ratio is at 60%, but your COD is 28.96. So on average, you're 30% off from what that level of assessment is. So you're going to be valued anywhere between 80 and 40% of value. That's a wide range. Their price-related differential is 1.08. They are drastically undervaluing higher price properties and drastically overvaluing lower price properties. That's shifting the burden, the tax burden, from the higher price to lower price properties. So you're just not getting any sort of equity there. So hopefully that addresses why we do what we do. It's really for that equity portion. If we don't do what we do, the taxes aren't distributed equitably. So this, obviously we can't do what people want us to do with that assessment cycle. So this legislation or this resolution would urge New York State to set an assessment cycle, at least by local option. I had met with Assemblywoman Galiff during her last months before she retired, and this was one of the things that she wanted. This was one of the things the real property tax directors has had on our legislative agenda. So I'm not overly optimistic that something like this would pass, but it can't hurt to ask, and it can't hurt to have that discussion. You know, ideally, if you ask me which one would I want to go, annually is obviously the best one to go, but it's also the hardest one to do. I think this is a good marriage between not having inequity creep into our assessment roll. It allows us to plan, allows you to budget, and quite frankly, it doesn't give the taxing jurisdictions every year an increase in the tax base to hide tax levy increases. We saw that happen with Ithaca. We've shown it over the years with data. You know, when we went to that 3-year cycle back in 2006 and 7, tax levy increases didn't increase nearly as much as they did prior and after.
All right, let's, I know folks are going to want to talk, so who wants to go first? Mike.
We talked earlier about 3 years versus annual. Why 4 years?
Just looking at what the schedule would be. The 1 year to clean up after a revaluation. You know, we're still dealing with our revaluation. We have our small claims assessment review. We have 12 that was filed, our tax certiorari's, projects that we said, oh, after this reval, we need to make sure we have better data on mobile homes. So we're working through that. Then we have 1 year to prepare. Do we need to change neighborhoods? What sort of income and expense data do we need to gather? And then it takes 2 years to revalue all of those parcels. You do vacant land, farms in year 1, some of your commercials, and then you do all of your residential in year 2 and the other. So, I mean, 3 to 4, could we make 3 work? We could make 3 work.
I remember after the 3 years last time, was it, you said 06 or 07?
Yep, in 2008, we went back to 100%.
People were enraged about the increase of the assessment after the 3 years. I don't have to tell you that, but just similar to what we had this year. And I know the assessment department back then didn't want to go to the 3 years, but I'm having trouble here. I still think I've been convinced that annual assessment is the way we should be doing it. I don't have a problem with a resolution to the state saying you got to change and set a regular cycle for everybody, but I kind of question whether we should be saying this and doing something different, and whether if there's, as you say, a local option on this thing that in the resolution, aren't all the places that don't assess now just going to opt out or not opt in, whichever way it's set up. So I'm concerned about that. And one other thing you mentioned, like in Tioga County with their assessments, I see their tax bills a lot. So Cayuga and other ones too. And there's a thing on the tax bills that says what the assessment is, but it also has the assessor's estimate of full market value on the tax bill. So I don't know where they're getting that from as opposed to their assessments, but they must be looking at it at a regular basis.
The assessor's estimate of market value is simply just the assessment divided by the level of assessment or the equalization rate. So it's just a calculated figure. They're not looking at it on any sort of regular basis. It's just math creating that. And that reason is why a non-annual reassessment program isn't transparent, because you can change everyone's estimate of market value by just changing one figure and not notifying people of that. And the only time they see it is when they get their school tax bill or their town and county tax bill. If they get that tax bill, you know, it may go to their escrow company and the receipt may not have that information on it. That was the biggest complaint that we heard in 6 and 7 when we were on triannual was, you raised my value and you didn't tell me. That's the benefit. I mean, under current law, annual reassessment is by far the best way to go. But is there a way that doesn't jeopardize the equity of annual reassessment, provides a little more clarity to the public, and provides us a better way to budget and staff my office so that we know? So it's not, you know, in an ideal world, yes, we would stay annual and we would keep moving on that. But, you know, sometimes after dealing with this last 6-7 months, you kind of question, is your good doing more harm? And I don't know that answer, but that's why I said, all right, I want to bring this out here for a topic for a discussion. And if it is doing more harm, let's reevaluate that. You know, is there a better way to do that? And this is an option.
All right, let's see. Rich.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Mike on this, that we should try to do it the right way. But I understand that there would be some benefit to not having the argument every year of people screaming about their assessments and focusing all of that anger every 4 years. It's probably, but it does seem like we drift away from actual equity year on year as we do that, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
you do. And that's, you know, it is after 3 years, is that too much inequity? Is 4 years? You know, we know 10 years is too much. You know, is 1 year somewhere in the middle there? It's probably going over from creating too much inequity or not having that inequity on the roll. And I don't know what that would be. I guess I could go back and try to figure out where, if we didn't make assessment changes over those years, where would our values have really falling out of an equitable portion? You know, one thing that kind of penalizes us is our equity has a much wider range than most towns do. You know, we have rural areas of our town and rural school districts, and then we have locations right next to Cornell University. Those parcels are going to change in value dramatically different rates. In a town, you have a little more uniformity within your town and your location. So here, yeah, it's much better to do annual so that the places that are appreciating at a higher rate than those that aren't can be adjusted.
Yeah, and I guess to the point of the resolution, I would like New York State to work better, but given there were 24,000 bills or more introduced this year, I doubt this will see the light of day. Maybe I should be more optimistic, but do we want to even bother? You know, I mean, we need to care about what's here. I'd like New York State to run better, but I don't think that they will. And you have a sentence in here, since New York State does not gain any money from the local property tax, they have been reluctant to step in and change the current system. I mean, maybe that's the rationale. It seems like it's quite possible, but we don't know why. And they seem to be focused on other things rather than good government. It's just.
Yeah, that's the one, you know, my father had my position for many years and worked in the office. And after he retired, I asked him, I'm like, Dad, why didn't you go on all of these state teams that I'm getting invited for and, you know, try to help solve the real property tax law? He's like, you're not going to fix it. Stay in Tompkins County, fix Tompkins County. You'd think after 28 years I'd learn that, but I still keep getting dragged out, and I still hold that optimism that at some point New York State will come around and hopefully increase our grades from a D on every property tax report card. You know, we have no standard cycle. We have no standard level of assessment. There's no teeth behind. So, you know, if you haven't done a revaluation since the Civil War and the state allows that, yeah, we're not going to change the state.
Keep up the good fight, Jay.
Yeah.
Greg.
So just to be clear, we can enact your proposal without the state?
No.
We cannot?
No, we couldn't do exactly what I would want to do by freezing that valuation date and keeping everybody at 100%. What if you said, no, we want to do a 4-year cycle, we would say, all right, yep, in 2024, we're at 100%. Next year, New York State will monitor our assessment roll, and we would probably drop to 95%. That means everyone's market value just went up 5%, and we didn't tell them of that. Other than we post a press release saying our level of assessment dropped to 95%.
Which would mean that your prior year's assessed value would go up by 5%.
No, the assessed value stays the same, but the assessor's market value estimate
market value
goes
estimate
up 5%.
would go up, and that would be the notice essentially we would be providing to the community.
No, we wouldn't send out that notice.
No, but if we made a public notice,
Yeah.
like in the newspaper where we put all public notices, which is sufficient for local law changes, et cetera, I mean, we could be notifying the public through that type of change. So that, to me, it's a little bit of some semantics. I mean, I understand there's some nuanced differences, but if there's places that haven't reassessed since the Civil War and there's no teeth behind it, why don't we do what's right for Tompkins County? Because the challenge I have is the inequities that we create with other counties, right? By us doing what's ideal and other counties or other taxing jurisdictions around us not, we're now at an unfair disadvantage in New York State because of our property taxes are so much higher and theirs are so much lower, making those communities potentially more attractive for people to live and those type of things. So I think when we talk about equity how is the statewide equity not factored into it the way that local equity is?
Yep. The statewide equity that's where the equalization rate comes from. So if you haven't done a revaluation, there's something like, where is it? 55 assessing units in New York State have a level of assessment between 0 and 10%. So if you had a level of assessment of 10%, your equalization rate is 10%. Or let's use simpler math. If you had an equalization rate of 50%, say the Cortland School District or the town of Cortlandville, we share part of that school district. So our assessments in the town of Groton are at 100%. Their tax rate at 50% would be double. So our Cortland School District rate, say $14 per thousand. In Cortland County, it's $28 per thousand. So that equalization rate that New York State creates is supposed to adjust for that equity.
Sure.
So overall level of assessment it adjusts for. Places that don't reappraise get more inequity within their assessment roll. So on average, they're at 50%. But when you dive down on a parcel, they could be anywhere between 25 and 75%.
And that's when we share overlapping taxing jurisdictions. But, for some place where we may not share a school district with another taxing jurisdiction, their property tax could be much lower based on, the rates that they decide or how often they reassess, et cetera.
Well, I think their taxes would be lower when the towns, the school, and the county decide to spend less.
That's also true. Yeah, but what people look at, right, are the assessed value, which is, again, one piece of that equation. I've always appreciated, Jay, about you that you're willing to reassess your department and your work, right?
No pun intended.
No pun intended, for lack of a better word, and come back and hear feedback and try to find a solution. And I think there's a lot less important things that we've sent to the state. So it does sort of irk me a little bit to hear why even try. Because of some of the resolutions we've sent, the feel-good resolutions, as we call them. This actually, I think, is something meaningful, and we have an affordability issue in New York State. And I think, I know we want to be at 100% for some reason that's ingrained in us but we can be 100% of 80%. There's ways I think we can make this work, and I think, would this require your office to have more staff, or would you be able to accommodate?
No, we would still need more staff with a 4-year cycle, and you'll see that request once you get our budget.
Okay, so this doesn't really save us any money. So what does it do? What's the value?
Yep. So this provides surety to the public of knowing every 4 years, that's when they're going to get their assessment change notice. I heard a lot from the public, from the legislature, why are we doing this again? Why are we getting another change notice? I hate going to my mailbox in February and March. It also provides me knowing what we need to do. As the department head, it's hard to have our yearly work plan after the year starts. Just this week, I was able to look at our assessment roll, and I don't think we're going to have to make any residential market value changes this year. We're going to be able to skirt in 96%, and with the state's 5% level of tolerance, that 96% can really be considered at 100%. There's enough static in the real estate market. It's not like the soybean market and everything's perfect. So, there is some leeway being held there. But, and then, it's also, we hear about tax levy increases being hidden in a tax rate discussion. Mm-hmm. And this would provide some benefit to the public of that.
And so, would this also help smooth out some of the peaks and or valleys, the highs and lows in the real estate cycle, so that we could get a more true 100% with more data points?
more inequity would probably come in through those years because we're always going to be valuing as of that same date. So we're going to have 3 or 4 years of knowing so much about all of those sales because we're going to keep using them over and over again. Now, every time we reassess, we have to learn more about those sales. Why did somebody buy it? What did they buy? What was the inventory? What were the list of renovations that were done that is in the listing but was not a result of a building permit, and they didn't, maybe that work didn't need to rise to a building permit. So just sales verification for us to stay up to date is a task in itself. Hopefully that answered.
Let's go to Susan, and then we should probably wrap this up.
I just wanted to follow up on Greg's, that about passing a feel-good. I think that if we did do this, it would send, even if the state doesn't do anything, it does send a message, and I think that at least for the people who live in Tompkins County, they will see that we are trying to make things a little bit more equitable and transparent.
All right.
That's one, and I always tell my people, I'll try anything in the office. If we can take a look at it, is it going to work? Is there a better way to do something? Let's give it a try. The worst, it's going to fail miserably, and then we go back to what it was. You can't be stuck in your own patterns. Let's try to figure out, is there a better way? There may not be. This may get shot down and annual is the best and we continue on with that. Let's do what's best for us. And I'm confident the 14 of you would figure that out.
Well, that's very generous of you. All right, Rich, then I think we need to vote.
Yeah, I was just going to acknowledge, I think Susan and Greg are probably right. I had a moment of weakness in thinking about our great New York State government. And we should always be happy warriors and try to make things better. I'd feel more comfortable if it was a 4-year cycle or less, so that we could opt to do annual if we chose to continue that. But I guess I'll support the resolution, given that it does push New York State in the right direction, I think.
All right, great. Thank you for good conversation, as always, about assessment. Let's go ahead and vote. And again, this is the resolution urging New York State to pass an assessment cycle bill. So all in favor? That is 4 opposed. That is 1, so that passes. Great, well, thank you, Jay. Always a good conversation, and I know you have more stuff for us next month.
Yep, yeah, we'll bring back the exemptions. Thank you to Maury for helping us rewrite and make our exemption statutes a little more transparent. So we'll bring those to you next month.
Great, well, enjoy your August ahead. All right, we are gonna move on to, excuse me, Board of Elections. And Steve DeWitt and Alana Congdon are here. Come on up. We're interested in any general updates you want to share, but we also, there were some questions about what ranked choice voting would be like, so happy to turn it over to you.
So what are you looking for, about ranked choice voting or just anything we want to talk about?
Both.
Okay.
Anything you want to update us on, but also I think there were questions about, the city talking about ranked choice voting and how that would impact things. So.
Well, I guess to update you, I think you're probably all aware that a few activists or few people in the city of Ithaca filed a petition with the city of Ithaca to purportedly to have all the city offices that come up for election to be decided by ranked choice voting, and also they had a caveat in there about having open primaries, and if you look at the wording in the petition, I thought it was a little murky as what the ballot access process would be. you know, so Maury can correct me if I'm wrong. The city has a process. Once those petitions are filed with the city, we have really nothing to do with those petitions. They are filed with the city, and the city clerk tries to see, tries to comes up with a decision as to whether the petition meets the signature requirements. And then the county attorney has criteria that the county attorney to whether the petition is valid. And I think there's 3 or 4 criteria, and I think one of the criteria is which dealt with financial impact. The city hasn't formally said, but apparently is going to say it doesn't meet that criteria, so that remains to be seen, but it appears that the city is likely to rule that the petition is not in order. This is, but it has created a lot of debate. And I think that what really, if you're going to move to a ranked choice voting, I think, personally, I don't think it makes sense to do it within the city of Ithaca, only because of the history of this century, 24 elections. I think we've run 110 elections in the city of Ithaca in that time frame, and there's only 3 instances in which the winner got less than 50% of the vote. And those were all primary elections. And the other reason I think it's probably not the right place to start it is about 2/3 of the time, there's only one candidate on the ballot in the city. And, that's, my personal opinion from, running elections and all that. I think that if you were going to even entertain doing this, it probably makes more sense to do it on the New York State level, because just a lot of the different operational things. I mean, the city would take a financial hit it would cost them more to run ranked choice voting.
That was going to be my question, how significantly more, or what do you have a sense?
I don't know, have you done an analysis on that, Maury?
Alana had begun looking into, sort of estimating what the specific things are, because there's kind of a laundry list of things you have to do to implement ranked choice voting, including a tabulation machine, software, getting it certified by the state, training personnel. And so we don't have those specific numbers for implementing in the city, but there was a survey done a few years ago in jurisdictions that have implemented it. And it's, granted, they're much larger jurisdictions than the city of Ithaca, but some of the expenses are still the same. And none was less than $100,000. So it's a significant, it would be a significant expenditure. I think to some degree in deciding the certification issue, the city was wondering, well, isn't this a county expense? So I brought all the provisions to their attention about how the county can charge those back. And, we'll see. Alan Carrison's certification deadline is Friday. I suspect that they won't certify it, but it remains to be seen. If it's not certified, the reasons are given to the petitioners, and they can refile or they can challenge it. Here, the municipal home rule law requires for an initiative that requires an expenditure of money that there be a financing plan included in the petition. Here, there's none, so I think it would be sent back for them to develop a financing plan if they wish. And I think, they may well be taking into account the other things that Steve had talked about, and perhaps, may take their initiative to the state level as opposed to keeping it local. And I think on the state level, New York City has adopted ranked choice voting for primaries, and you know, overall, given the size of the jurisdiction, I think it went fairly well, despite the criticism that you see in the press. So and there's legislation in Albany that's been sitting in committee for a couple of years to do a statewide study of ranked choice voting. So I think that's probably the next big thing that we'll see on it. And, you know, depending on what happens with the local petition, but you know, we'll see Friday.
You might add, with the New York City model, they do it for primary elections, and one of the reasons they do that is because they have a threshold that a winner must meet. I thought it was 50, but I've seen recently that it's 40%, but there's a threshold that the winner must get at least 40 or 50% of the vote, and if they don't, they have a runoff. So there is a you know, incentive there because it saves them from running another election, and the added expense that you would put into implementing ranked choice voting probably is far less than what having another election would do.
Right, which compares with our local practice, because in New York City you'll have 4 or 5 people running for the same, in the same primary, and the same for congressional elections and so forth statewide. But where you don't have, you know, large numbers running, why do you need an instant runoff?
Well, if it were to, the petition was approved, what impacts would it have on your office?
Well, it definitely would have an impact. You know, this is uncharted waters for us. You know, it's unclear as to whether, you look at the real estate that on a ranked choice ballot. If you look at the mayoral race where they had 8 or 9 candidates, and you look at that ballot, the ballot is like a whole sheet of paper, you know, for one race.
Right.
So I have no idea. You know, it's definitely going to have an impact. There's certainly an education process. I don't think a lot of people, I think maybe in theory they kind of understand what it's about, but I don't think they know exactly how it plays out. But, and there's just a lot of, you know, that's why it's much better to do it at the state level. Because if it's done at the state level, you have the New York State Board of Elections would then be, you know, charged with putting together rules and regulations on how to run these things. You would have all the, you know, you would have consistent method of administering. You would have support. You know, here we'd kind of be on our own. Could help, maybe get some help from New York City, what their experience is, but they only do it in primary elections. They don't do it in general elections. This is saying every election.
Right. Rich.
Yeah, I had asked that this item be added to the agenda because I talked to some of the people that were supporting the petition, and I wanted to hear about feasibility. You know, it sounds like if you had to do it, you can do it. Is that the case?
Well, right now, there's no, the software for the voting machines that we have, there's no software that's been certified by the New York State Board of Elections. So if we were to do it, it'd be a pretty real heavy lift because everything would be manually counted. You could certainly get a count for the #1 vote, but if you happen to have something where
There is software in other states, I assume. It's just not certified yet in New York.
That's my understanding. And what I don't know, you know, is whether it's an add-on. Like the financial thing is, you know, the city's got to make a decision too. I don't think anybody that's been putting this forward has fleshed out what the costs are going to be.
I think we should do that. And I say that because, well, certainly on the national level, there's lots of talk about this is a time we have to think hard about democracy, small d. And I will put on the record, I'm registered as a Democrat, I ran as a Democrat, and I'm elected as a Democrat. But in the city, there really is only one party. And you mentioned that so many of the races are unopposed. And some of that is because if you get the Democratic endorsement, it's done. And that can be done at the committee level. and certainly at the primary level. But we get to the general election, and there's independents, there's Republicans, that really have no voice at all. And I don't want that kind of anemic system in our local government. And it's hard to complain about the national government if we're not walking the walk here. Ranked choice voting would be a way for us to get to the general election and have real choices. And I think that's important to look at hard. I think it's easy to say this is difficult because of the software, because of uncertainty in the petition, but I think we want to understand it, and we want to try to see if this is better for us. My view.
Thank you, Rich. Where does it stand at the state level? Are people talking about it, or
The only thing I've seen on the state level, without, talking to people, just, sort of what's available online, is that the state legislature has a bill in committee to do a study of the statewide impacts of ranked choice voting and the feasibility and so forth. I'm happy to circulate that draft legislation that's existing on the state.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, Mike?
Yeah, I would be very reluctant to see us go down that route. I don't have a problem with the winner of a plurality being elected in a primary or an election. Thinking back, if Abraham Lincoln would not have been president if he'd had to have a plurality, or if he'd had to have a majority, let's put it that way. He was elected on a plurality. I'm thinking, and sometimes people get elected who the majority don't like or are horrified that that person got elected. I think of Chicago when there was the LaRoucheites running and won some elections out there, and the people in Chicago were not terribly happy about that. But election comes around, and those people usually go, and that's what happens. And it's all right to shake up the electoral system now and then with different people. I think we have a good system, single-member districts. I would be totally opposed to open primaries, where the abuses there are huge, and we've even seen something similar to that recently in Tompkins County, where in a primary election, members of one party were recommending that their members change the party so they could vote in the other party's primary. And that was something that was looked at askance by the party that was being attacked. Those things can happen. You take an open primary, people will go and vote in the other party's primary in order to elect the candidate they think will be easiest for their own candidate to beat. And I think primaries to have candidates picked should be part of the job of the party. That's why we have parties, and that's why we support them. So glad to hear about this issue. I know it's something that's done in other areas, but as for me, I'm certainly not convinced that we should do that.
Okay. I want to keep talking about this, but we have a lot of other things to discuss today. So, Rich?
Yeah, this I don't believe would be a county decision, right? The city would make its decision. Right. And just a moment down the rabbit hole, that in the 1860 convention, I believe Lincoln's whole strategy was to be the second choice, right? That there were all these favorites, and he lobbied to say, well, if you don't choose them, choose me. And when they all failed, he became the candidate. Ranked choice. But I really think we need to do something in the city, not necessarily outside of the city, but we're disenfranchising people and we're not having competitive elections. Again, I don't want to pick on or hold myself out as an example, but the last 2 elections, I ran unopposed. That's wrong. Somebody should be trying to say, Rich, come on, get out of here.
We want you out of here, Rich.
I know you guys agree with that, but
Oh, come on, stick around, Rich.
but the idea that nobody thinks they have a shot, and that's my fear, is that they don't even think it's worth trying because the system is set up that it's done. Anyway.
All right, well, thank you for the information. Thank you, Maury. I think you also had a question about the process regarding, did you want to talk about
No, I think that,
rank
working
choice?
the election?
Yeah.
I think I raised.
Was that you?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I just was, and I think I maybe touched with Lisa on this too, about staff who want to either volunteer or work the elections and the complexities that those maybe create with overtime and comp time and et cetera, et cetera. Just wanted to make sure we were understanding of what that whole process is. And if now is not the best time, if we want to postpone that for more information, I'm fine with that too. I just, it was part of a larger conversation that I had the opportunity to touch base with the folks at the Board of Election, and just wanted to see how we could make sure that all of the staff in Tompkins County who wanted to participate could participate.
So we've had a virtually nonstop email chain between HR, county attorney, finance, myself, and Alana and Steve. And I'm not sure, I believe where it landed last, and Maury, perhaps you and Lori had the last communication on it. It's going to just require some overtime through Fair Labor Standards Act and payment of staff from their home department, their salary for overtime. Am I expressing that? Please feel free to jump in.
That's correct. As I understand it, the issue is not so much from the Board of Elections angle so much as because during election week, employees will end up working more than 40 hours and therefore get into overtime category. Who pays for the overtime? That seems to be what we are working through right now. I don't think that there's an answer to that question yet, but we're getting closer. But that seems to be the nub of the debate: is how do we deal with the overtime, make sure that the overtime is approved, since that's usually a department by department decision, and how is it paid for? And I think if I read one of Alana's emails correctly yesterday, the Board of Elections can kick in some of the money to that. Then the question is, well, if a department is objecting, should we create another accounting mechanism to provide the funding for that overtime so that it doesn't come out of a particular department's budget? So I think that's mostly logistical. Is that fair to say? Yes. That just to set up the mechanism to do this?
Well, I think it's great to hear that everybody's working on it at such a high level. I think it's important as an organization, right, as a county, we are supportive of our democratic process and what, sort of fuels the engine for government as public servants, and can participate in that process if people so choose. And obviously there's a financial implication that we need to weigh and figure out. But I would hope that the financial implication doesn't limit or preclude someone who may want to volunteer or participate or partake in that process from doing that, recognizing we can't have all county employees out there working on election day because we still have a county to run, but just hope we can find the balance between the financial implications, people's civic duties, and allowing them to participate. So that's my only plug, but would be curious to hear how we solve that issue, or if it's a policy or something that needs to be created or amended. Look forward to reviewing that as well.
I think from what I saw, and perhaps a Board of Elections review in other counties, it was a resolution through the legislature for it. So I think probably if we get the logistics worked out, it would be coming through this committee in that format.
Great.
Yeah, great. That sounds,
Thank you.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for bringing it up, Greg, and thanks for working on it.
I'd just add, it'd be really helpful if we could get this done sooner rather than later, because we have a few county employees that have indicated an interest, and we really do not know what to tell them. And as far as what their, how they handle their pay, they used to really have to take a hit, and that until something gets put forward, their only alternative is to take a hit or to not work, and we
Could use the help.
Well, thanks for the constant email thread that you're all on to keep it,
We're at 11 pages. So.
Wow, impressive. You guys are impressive. I'll just ask you guys any other updates, or I guess one specific question. Election security has been being talked about quite a bit. Is there anything else you want to share about that or on your radar?
We just went to a tabletop exercise last week in Syracuse, and we had many attendees from the county, so that was great to have that support. And I appreciate Bridget reaching out and starting that conversation a few months ago. That was great. That was some of the things we were hearing from the other departments we hadn't heard yet, so we just started our conversations internally yesterday about what to do if this happens or that happens. And we have another meeting in 6 weeks, I think, to continue that conversation and hopefully be able to pass some of that on to our poll workers, so when they're at the site, they feel supported by the county. So.
Great. I'm glad, I'm always impressed of our departments being proactive, and I know you're thinking about this, so that's great. Any other questions for Steve and Alana today? All right, well, thank you so much for being here, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along. We have lots and lots of more good discussions ahead. All right, so we have a resolution to update Administrative Policy Manual Policy 07-09, mobile devices, and Policy 07-10, passwords, ID 12602. Can somebody move that? Rich, seconded by Susan. And I think we can probably take them both together. If we need to separate them, I guess we can do that. So am I looking at you, Lisa, for mobile devices?
Sure. Well, the policies come through administration, but these policies live and originated from Information Technology Services. I see Kim Moore on the Zoom screen that may be able to speak to any questions you may have about these.
Great. And Lauren is here too. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you, Lauren.
That's okay. Kim is policy queen, so,
Questions, comments? This is a new policy regarding the use and security of mobile devices. Mike.
Read this. I thought the tone was pretty threatening to employees, which I didn't, particularly the last paragraph. I had trouble with that. The other thing I wondered about is, does this allow us to have passwords or other things with facial recognition, which is something I would be concerned about?
Mike, which policy are you talking about, the mobile device or the password policy?
I think the password policy, but I think both of them have the biometric definition in them.
Yeah, they do. What is your specific question or concern about that?
I just think facial recognition is something that's out there and is very threatening to the public. You know, we know situations, and I'm not saying that we're going to necessarily do it, but if we've got the software, it could be improperly used, or it could be rated or something else, despite our best efforts. I can remember a couple of years ago where people were excluded from going into the stadium in New York City because they were attorneys involved in a lawsuit about that Madison Square Garden, and there was facial recognition software being used, and when they were spotted with this, they were excluded from being able to enter and be a participant in the audience.
Mike, as far as biometrics in these two policies, it's more for the second factor authentication. So we're seeing more and more computers and technology that we use your thumbprint or a facial recognition to log you into your machine.
I continue to be worried about that. As far as my first issue about the threatening nature, that paragraph's at the end of the password section.
Mike, are you referencing the enforcement
Yes.
section, which is on all of the policies and actually will be on all the policies going forward, just to make sure we're all on the same page?
Yeah, I think that is, yeah, it's on both that we see here.
Okay. So a little bit of backstory here. Lauren and I work with an independent consultant, and this is basically recommended verbiage for pretty much any IT or any policy in general. But obviously it can be changed. It's definitely not our intent to be threatening, but it is certainly our intent to make sure that people understand that there is a responsibility as an employee of the county to take these policies seriously and understand that their actions can not just directly affect themselves and their department, but the county as a whole. So we should be able to, if it's really something you guys are not comfortable with, we can work with county admin, we could work with legal. I'm sure, Lauren, we could come up with something that maybe softens it a little bit. And that's good feedback because we hadn't looked at it that way before.
There are a lot of county employees that are afraid of technology, that are not up to speed with technology, and don't want to do something wrong. And I just don't think we should be contributing to that discomfort by saying, boy, if you do something wrong, look what's going to happen.
Okay,
I
understood.
definitely hear you, Mike. I mean, the very last sentence is in relation to illegal activities or theft. And, you know, those are things that should be enforced. If somebody, you know, steals a computer or, you know, their phone or whatever, I mean, I guess I'm not sure. I get your point that, like, people may feel uncomfortable using technology, but I'm not sure this is about the usage of technology. It's about mobile devices, and then how, you know, passwords, how to use passwords. So personally, I didn't find it threatening. I think it's pretty straightforward about, you know, here's the rules, and we all need to follow the rules. Department heads or supervisors will be the ones, you know, looking at how people are following the rules. Okay, I think I had Greg and then Rich.
Yeah, I think two questions as it relates to Mike's, to the enforcement section. Would it make sense to put one of the actions or corrective actions could potentially be coaching or additional training, right? As maybe like as a first step, or, you know, if something is, oh, somebody's not as familiar, they made a simple mistake. Again, I want to use the expression, ignorance is no excuse for the law. You know, and policies are sort of the governing pieces of the workplace, and we should all be aware of what those are. But maybe to lead in with a softer coaching training, additional coaching training, and then, suspension, restriction of access. But again, obviously that's up to the department head and the severity of the issue. So that's the first comment. And the second comment is, as it relates to biometrics, do we require employees in any way to use biometrics as a form of login to certain systems, or is there, because I know, for example, at one of my businesses, we use fingerprints for time clocks, and New York State requires that they sign off and authorize them to use their fingerprint, and they can withdraw that at any time, and they can go to a card or passcode if they don't want to share their biometric feature for login. And it talks about how we store their biometric information. Is that something that we have, or is this just sort of defining what biometrics are as it relates to county devices, et cetera?
Greg, we had that. That's the only scenario I think we have biometrics set up is in our highway and facilities department for their time clocks.
Okay.
And they have the opportunity to not do that if they could use a regular time clock or something. Is that the case, or do they have to use the fingerprint?
It's been a few years since we set that up, so I'd have to refer back to payroll to see where we're at with that, but I believe so.
Okay. That is a good question, but it's also not necessarily related to these two policies, right? I mean, we're not talking about people signing in to their, time clock or whatever. Rich?
On the mobile device, is that for county issued, or is it anybody who's using their device to access county stuff?
It'd be for county issued.
Or a personal device like a smartphone that you're using county, you have county data on. For example, if you use your smartphone for any county purposes, in theory, you should also be protecting your device.
Yeah, so in my own case, I don't get county email on my personal phone, not because I couldn't figure out how to do it, of course, but it was a discrete decision. This policy wouldn't apply to my mobile device, is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, if you have no county data on it, then no, it does not apply.
Okay, and then I had one question on the password policy. At the bottom of page 28, you have Tompkins County mandates that users adhere to the following guidelines on password construction. Are you mandating the guidelines, or what is the mandate? That you try to follow these rules, or is guidelines not quite the right word?
The way the system's set up, Microsoft Active Directory, when you change your password, it won't let you change your password to anything less than.
So they're not guidelines.
Well, they are malleable, so that's the thing, right? They're the current guidelines for security standards for passwords. And that is the hard part about writing policy and including these kind of the specifics in there, because Lauren and I wrote this policy this time last year. By the time we went to review it, this section had to be rewritten because the policy standards had already changed.
Yeah, I think maybe instead of guidelines, requirements.
Or standards?
Standards, or, yeah, and you might make clear that you're not getting a password if you don't do these things, because it looks like you're supposed to try. And I didn't quite understand that.
So actually, if you try and set a password that does not meet these set of guidelines, the system will say, sorry, that doesn't meet the requirements, and you have to go back at it again.
Yeah, and so that's my semantic issue, is that they're not guidelines, they're requirements.
Yep, they are indeed.
Okay.
Potentially changing guidelines to requirements is okay.
Yeah, I think so too. That's a good catch. When we live with these policies, we look at them so much that we miss the little things, so we appreciate your feedback.
Okay, so changing to requirements, does that work for everybody?
Friendly.
Okay. I can't remember. Did you move it?
I think I did, and I think Susan seconded.
Okay, all right. Okay, Mike.
Yeah, one other thing on the password thing on page 28, personal identifiable information, mentions Social Security numbers. I have a real problem with using Social Security numbers to identify people. Sometimes when we've had things that come from the county, they want us to log in as an employee with our Social Security number, and I will not do that. And I don't think we should ask people to do that. I can't stop the county from, which knows my Social Security number, from poking it into whatever they need to, but I don't think that employees should be required to use their Social Security number for identification. That's not the purpose of Social Security, and Social Security is used for so many things, from health records to bank records and everything else, that the less chance of getting it out there is better.
All right, thank you all. Anything else? Any other changes or questions? Yeah.
We keep that last paragraph in the two things. I'm not going to vote for either policy. If they want to take another stab at it, and the way was just discussed, maybe soften it, I'd be willing to relook at it.
Is Maury still here?
Is what?
Is Maury still on, still with us?
Yes, I am.
So, I don't know, Maury, you would be our next step probably in this process of talking to you and see what your opinion is.
I could offer some quick fixes here and comments too. One, it actually was softened up a little bit. That the reference, that any discipline pursuant to this policy is subject to applicable laws and collective bargaining agreements. And since the vast majority of employees covered by the policy are covered by collective bargaining agreements, all the progressive discipline requirements that go with that are embodied into the policy. And one of those things is if somebody is discharged because of a policy violation, which would not necessarily be something for a minor violation, but say somebody participates in an inside job to supply the county's confidential data to some party on the outside, I think that would probably be a dischargeable offense. It would be the county's burden of proof in any arbitration to prove that the individual had participated in that and violated the policy. But as a quick fix, we could say something like subject to regular disciplinary practices, applicable laws and collective bargaining agreements. And that should encompass it without going into the kind of detail that Greg was talking.
Okay, say that fix again. Where would you put that?
Up to and including termination of employment, subject to regular disciplinary practices, applicable laws, and collective bargaining agreements.
Mike.
Well, thanks for that suggestion, Maury, but I don't think it solves my issue. If we delete that paragraph entirely, it doesn't mean the employee can't be disciplined. Is that correct?
That's correct, too.
Okay, I think Rich and then Greg.
Yeah, just in the rollout of this policy, assuming that we pass it, I assume that you'd be doing something to go to the people with county-issued mobile devices to make sure they knew they could get assistance in setting up security and passwords. Question mark.
We do that by default anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, policy would go out to everyone, but maybe additional, information that we can help you with this. If you have any questions, come to us. Greg.
Yeah, I think we had a conversation earlier with Jay about what's a policy without enforcement. So I think that it needs to be clear what happens if you violate the policy. I think that's just another transparent step. We're providing our workforce. So I don't see an objection to an enforcement policy, and these are serious issues, right? Because if somebody violates this and everybody's social security number gets out there, then it should be dealt with, right? And that's a big mistake. And some, mistakes have consequences. They can be small or large. So I don't see an issue with an enforcement clause. Maura, I appreciate you pointing out that the collective bargaining agreements, there's already progressive discipline baked into those. So for me, that satisfies it. I don't see any reason to remove this from the policy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I guess I would also say, like, there's common sense with this. If somebody makes a password that doesn't have a exclamation point in it, they're not going to get fired.
Right.
There's, a lot of this is very basic stuff that the IT department is already doing. There's something that talks about, the ITS department is responsible for the, software that the factor authentication, so it's, some of it is not stuff that the employees have to do anyway.
To that point, Amanda, I just wanted to let you know, obviously our intent is not to gotcha the team, right? We're not looking to get county employees in a gotcha situation. So we are as proactive as we can be. And about maybe 6 weeks ago or so, Lauren and I sent out all county employee messaging about the 14-character password. It came from me and it was super long, so maybe you might have clicked delete it. I hear that a lot, that people sometimes bypass my messaging. But we did send that, and we do try and stay proactive because it's our intent to protect the county, but not in a gotcha way, right? So with all of these passwords or message policies going forward, you're going to notice that there's new things that we haven't talked about before. As we get to email, we're going to be talking about signatures and formatting and things like that. And Lauren and I are very well aware of the fact that policies can't be implemented until staff has a chance to meet the requirements first. We're not trying to gotcha on anybody.
Yeah, and I feel like we had a conversation here not that long ago about cybersecurity, and if someone does make a mistake and they click on that link that causes something bad to happen, they're not going to get fired for that. That was a mistake, and we all make mistakes, and there are those bad guys out there that are trying to take advantage. But these are some things I think that people do have control over. You have control over what you keep on your smartphone, So, yeah, I'm okay with the enforcement part as well. I understand that does bring up questions, though. All right, I think we're ready to vote at this point, and this includes both of the policies that we're talking about. So, all in favor? That is 4. Opposed? That is 1, so that passes. Great. Thank you, Lauren and Kim. Always appreciate you being here. All right. Moving on to legislature items. So the question has come up, I think I brought it up earlier in the year when Rich left the History Center board and I got on it. There's just been a little confusion and not quite knowing what the role should be of a legislator on the History Center board. So I would just clarify that there's a difference between the TC, the Tompkins Center for History and Culture. They have a working group or a governance council, which the county has a spot on. I don't know that it's any sort of legally binding organization. It's a group that gets together once a month to talk about any issues in the building, or who's using the whatever conference room when, that sort of thing. When are we getting our HVAC, whatever. So that's a separate thing, and I've been attending those. Rich attended those for several years. So the question is about the History Center board, which Rich was serving on as a voting member for several years, and I have been serving on this year as a voting member, but it's just a question of should we have a voting, does the legislature need a voting member on the History Center board? And we do give them some money. The legislature gives the History Center some money. I think it's maybe up to $50,000 or something this year. I looked and now I'm not remembering. Do you either of you remember?
We have an arrangement with the History Center whereby we used to pay their rent, and now that they are in the Center for History and Culture, instead of doing that where they pay us and then we reimburse them for their rent, they are in the Center for History and Culture rent-free, essentially, and that's the
right. But in the last budget, there was some money that went to them, I think, because I looked it up.
There's program,
Maybe it's, yeah, Rich.
there's program funds, but there's also this arrangement, which is a little bit nebulous, but they act as our manager. So we are using fewer county resources to manage the building because some of that is taken over by the History Center, including they effectively organize and manage the Governance Council. So they're acting as an intermediary for the county with all the other participants in this center.
And that's the funding that we give them?
Some of that's in lieu of rent. It's a little nebulous, but it works, which is, I guess.
Okay. So I guess my question then, they have a new board president because their fiscal year starts in July. And I guess they need to talk it through and decide if they feel like it's important to have a voting seat for the legislature on the History Center board. But I think we need to as well. And, we have voting seats on other organizations that we give money to, and we don't have seats on other organizations that we give money to. So it's kind of like we have a precedent, but I'm just interested in what folks think going forward. Rich?
I obviously have an opinion because I was involved before the Tompkins Center History and Culture was purchased and renovated and opened. I started out on the board when they were in the Dean building at the base of State Street. The idea was we were entering into a very different partnership with the History Center. And some counties have county museums. In fact, they used to be in this space. We don't have a county museum. They function in that role. But when we were entertaining the idea of the Tompkins Center for History and Culture, we recognized this was a significant undertaking for the county, that it would be a long-term and very intertwined partnership between the History Center and Tompkins County, and having that board seat was important. I'm not serving in that role anymore, but I felt it was useful that it was a voting seat, given that this is a pretty unique position compared to other boards that the legislature interacts with, and that they're in our building, they're helping us manage that building, and they're effectively our county museum. I think it's worked. I don't know what your impressions are, Amanda, but I feel like it's functioning really well. I can tell you the Governance Council was pretty active when the building opened up. There was a lot of uncertainty, and those meetings have become a lot more boring. But at the time they weren't, and that's a good thing. But it underscores how there's all these things going on under the surface. For example, I'll just say use of copiers or internet service for the building. They're doing it on a concerted basis. So for a bunch of not-for-profits, they've been able to save a lot of money doing it that way. But it's been one tedious issue like that after another. I'd like to see us continue having a board seat and having a voting board seat.
Great, thank you. Something interesting that has come up that I have told them I would try to help work out is that they're starting to have lots more outside groups want to rent or use one of their, conference rooms or the CAP art space, or there's a couple of spaces. And Ben, the History Center director, has been the one organizing that. So, but now there's a question of like, well, if we're charging them fees to use the space, where do those fees go? And if the History Center director is the one spending his time doing that, well, maybe the History Center should be getting that income. So the Governance Council has had an initial conversation about that, but the idea is that we'll come up with a policy that maybe whoever is the one organizing the rental would get the funding from that. Anyway, we'll see how it develops, but that is an interesting thing for the Governance Council to pursue, with Ben using his time for that, So, Susan.
I just want to make sure I understand. So the History Center there was responsible for managing the building. So that seems like that would include assigning or renting out the space. So, yeah, so it makes
somebody has to.
Somebody has
exactly.
to.
So
yeah.
I'm thinking about the library, which is kind of a, the legislative liaison cannot be a voting member because the legislature is the main funding, and that's education law.
Yeah.
But that doesn't apply to the History Center. There's nothing like education law with regard to, okay. So it seems to me that the History Center should, if they're doing the work, they should get the funding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rich.
Not to go into the weeds too far here, but one of the issues I had advocated early on was that this building could be an incubator for arts and cultural not-for-profits that don't yet have
space, yeah.
And the critical mass
right.
to sort of have not-for-profit in a box, that they could use the meeting rooms, have a locker where they could store stuff and see if they develop. And that never took off. And I'd still like to see that as one of the potential uses of the building. But another area is that I don't think we've optimized use of the spaces as a revenue generating opportunity for the building, the TC,
yeah.
HC. And I think that is something where continued county involvement and guidance in how do we develop this. I'd advocated that the various organizations in that building should be doing a fundraiser or some sort of community event outside of the building on the Commons once a year to tell the world that they're there.
Yeah.
We don't want it sleepy. And again, I think the county could help with that.
Yeah. Susan.
So the employees of the History Center are History Center employees, not county employees?
Yes.
Because I also am, the History Center is, I think, severely understaffed given the level of responsibility they have. And I don't know what you do about that. I know it's a bad budget year, but I mean, that's something that I've seen for years.
Yeah.
And
a lot, we just went through the budget, and I sat with Ben for a long time understanding their budget, and, so much of it is grants, and it's Ben getting the grants. So, I mean, you could talk to it too, I'm sure, but it's a challenge for them to find money and, be able to pay people. Yeah. Lisa?
I wanted to throw in a few things just for everyone's awareness that we've recently met with Ben too regarding budget and have had conversations between county admin, finance, and the History Center regarding their role as that building manager, so to speak, and to ensure that we are taking away the nebulousness of it, and that it is following all of the rules that we need to for auditing purposes. So that's one thing that's that we've done recently. And then secondly, the you all recently passed a policy regarding the tenant selection process in the building, so that ultimately those decisions are made with legislature oversight, so that it's not, and Ben asked for that because he didn't want to have the onus of who is selected to be in the building on him. And then the last piece is the setting of rents for the building. It has been it had been the practice in the past for the rents charged to the tenants to cover the costs of operating the building. And we have continued, or we had planned to continue that with probably an inflation factor built in, so that we could set up a reserve account for unexpected building contingencies that come forward. But if you would like us to consider changes to that methodology, we'd be open to hearing them.
And there's some things I feel like it's not fully clear in my mind, but there's some things that we don't pay for that they have to pay for on their own, right? Or
I'm not sure what those would be.
well, I feel like there was recently, like, they're getting heat pumps or something with HVAC or something. Maybe I'm not sure. I don't know. Rich?
Yeah, just a little history for the other committee members. The policy has been that what we want to try to do is not charge market rate rent, that this is a home for not-for-profits, and that part of what they pay for is a reserve fund, so that the continued improvements to the building and maintenance are built in, but we're not charging for profit. Part of the rationale for that is that we want to support these organizations, their community benefits as a result, but also because the community helped fundraise a substantial amount of money. The number's gone out of my head, but I think it was over $2 million for the renovation. And that was a renovation of a county building. So we have received a tremendous benefit from that direction that will carry forward in the real property value. But I would not see any reason to change our policy.
Okay, so this is all very good and helpful. I feel like Rich and Susan have said that, yes, the legislature should have a voting seat on the History Center Board, which is separate from the TCHC. Greg and Mike, do you have an opinion on that? You have no opinion.
First time in a few years.
Somehow I don't believe you. Mike?
I just think that from the beginning of the conversation, I think that we should have a seat on the board.
Okay. All right. Well, it's possible that we might have sit down with the meeting with the president and the director. We'll see. I think he was going to take this topic to their board or their executive committee, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Amanda, if it would be helpful, I'd be happy to join you.
Great. Thank you.
If you wish. Otherwise, I'm happy to not join you.
I'm sure you want to sign up for another meeting, right? Yeah. All right, so next topic is back to the topic of salaries for the 2026 term for legislators. Thank you to our clerks for putting together a whole bunch of information, which is very helpful as we're thinking about this. You have the chart which lists numerous other counties, which was kind of surprising to me, a little bit eye-opening. And then some of the past resolutions that, so you can read through what we have done in the past. So, and then I think Mike has handed out a proposed resolution or salary which we still have time. We can come up with a proposal now, or we can, keep talking about it and work on a resolution for next month. Mike?
Have drafted these before, and my intention here was simply to put something on the table to begin discussion.
Great, thank you. So, questions on the chart, questions or thoughts on the previous resolutions? I do think it gives some good background on where we've been. No opinions from you people?
I have opinions now.
Rich?
Yeah, Mike, thanks for putting the draft together. Do we want to put it on the floor? I'm not sure I'd vote for it, but is that the right way to proceed to discuss it?
I didn't really expect it to be voted on today.
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
Just
it's up to the
discussion.
chair what she wants to do.
Then I just speak to the information provided by the clerks, which was surprising to me. It looks like we are in line roughly with a lot of the other counties of similar size. I think I've said this before, but I don't feel like there's anybody on this legislature who isn't pulling their weight. The amount of time, the thought, the work involved, I don't think anybody's overpaid. At the same time, in a year where we're asking departments to cut or consider 5% cuts to their budgets, I just struggle with this.
So would you, just for conversation's sake, would you be advocating for no increase at all?
Well, we're
And
talking
just-
about 2026, so
Yeah.
it would be a new legislature. We wouldn't be voting for ourselves. I'm struggling in my mind whether thinking about 2026 is okay, but that's a pretty hefty jump. I mean, it isn't in terms of, I think it still would reflect value to the taxpayer. But I don't know where I end up on that.
Okay. Greg? And then Mike?
You can let others go.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think now's the time we have to be thinking about this. Unfortunately, we do capital planning out to 2029. Like, we have to go down this path. We also don't necessarily have to ask for a 5% budget cut. And if we feel uncomfortable with asking for that 5% budget cut, we can also freeze our salary increase for the next year, which is something we could do if we wanted to feel better about that. But I do think we need to have a serious conversation. I think that there are some equity and inclusion issues as it relates to compensation for this role. To be able to dedicate the time that's required, it does not open that opportunity up for all who may want to participate because of the smaller amount of compensation that's provided for the work that's required, and the flexibility that you have to have in your schedule. So, I think as we look to the future and how do we make more accessible government, this is one opportunity to do that. Mike, I appreciate you putting this together. The one thing I would propose is some sort of annual increase that mirrors or looks at, maybe it's a 2% or 3% or something similar to some of our bargaining unit contracts. Historically, what has the management contract look like, or white collar, and how do we sort of mirror some of those increases? I like the fact that the chair and the vice chair, 1/2 and 1/4 being proposed, because I do think that's a lot more work. I think we could have debate if the chair's role, if 1/2 and 1/2 is enough. Seeing the work that Shauna and Dan and others have done over the years, it's quite a bit more. So is it 1.75 or 2? Those are questions that I think we should have. I did a little quick math, and as a living wage employer, right, the living wage is $18.45, and I think most of us have estimated it's anywhere between 20 and 30 hours a week, but 30 hours a week on average. So that's $15.60 in terms of annual working hours. So at a living wage at 30 hours, it would be $28,782. At 25 hours, it would be $23,985. So I think we need to keep that in mind as well as we look at that. So happy to keep this discussion. Those are just sort of my initial thoughts. You know, the mayor in the city of Ithaca right now is a $30,000 position, and common council is $17,991. I think those are also important to kind of measure against in terms of scale and compensation. So, Mike, I like the direction you went in this. I think that this is good with a few minor tweaks, but I think it's unfortunate timing, but I also think if we look at where the budget potentially will end up, I know we're asking them to prepare a budget with a 5% reduction, but are we actually going to approve that? Probably not, because I think that there's actually a path forward, which county administration is working diligently to ensure that maybe some of that doesn't need to actually come to fruition, some of those reductions. So I know we've asked, but I don't think that exercise is actually going to be fruitful. So those are my thoughts on this one.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I was going to bring up living wage too. I mean, we're going to have this big conversation about, you know, living wage passing a local law. Minimum wage?
Yeah, the discussion sorry, just to clarify, because this is a key nuance. Please. The discussion that we're having is about enacting a slightly higher minimum wage.
Okay.
Not necessarily living wage. Living wage has a very specific definition.
Okay.
And so that's just the nuance of that conversation.
Thank you. So, you know, should legislators be compensated in a similar manner? That's the question.
I had my hand up, so
sure.
I just wanted to mention that where the chair salaries are larger is off in this list. They're often substituting as a county administrator and get paid more for that, or they're the administrator for the Board of Supervisors, for example. We used to see that in Tioga County where they would pay a real high salary to their chair who basically was their county administrator. So you have to be a little bit careful there. And thought about, you know, whether we should do the CPI. CPI has been all over the place with inflation lately. And I just went back to saying, let's just put in an amount each year, whatever we decide on, and I had suggested 25. In our table, I had kind of hoped to see Broome and Chemung County, which we didn't see, both of which have county executives, of course, but might also be helpful to see what they do.
Okay, Ann Corman.
Thanks, Amanda. I also favor raising the salary for the next term of legislators to a living wage, and I also would propose an idea of tying it to, well, this one might have been said, but tying it to white collar as our management already is. So our white collar contract, what those raises are. For a couple of reasons. One is because we've been looking at, say, recently, in the recent past, our election workers, bringing them up to a living wage. And we're often saying who's not at the table, you know, how to get more younger, diverse folks in here from the community that represent the community. And I wasn't surprised, I'll backtrack a little bit, I wasn't surprised at the chart that I'm looking at regarding other salaries for county legislators or supervisors around the state, because when you look at the history of who has served on those boards, and including, you know, somewhat Tompkins County, it's often older men who were working full-time or retired. And so I feel really proud that we have now a much more diverse population on our legislature, but to keep that sustainable. And I know I've talked to a lot of people about running for legislature and other offices, and one of the things, especially with the economy, the trends that we're seeing, people often need to work. Anyway, all adults need to work in the household. Often people need to work more than one job. So this is, I think, really important to be able to allow people to do this. To take time out of their life and to have the responsibility of being on call 7 days a week. I think a living wage is a start. And so I would really push that we think about a living wage. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Annie. We have one other big topic to discuss, so I kind of want to wrap this up. I don't feel like we need to vote on anything today. Mike gave us a place to start with the numbers, suggesting 25,000. Just for my opinion, I'm comfortable with the chair's salary being 1.5. I do like the addition of the vice chair getting a little bit more compensation, because I think that is motivating for someone to want to have that role, but also, you know, they do more than the rest of the legislators. So I've heard a lot of different ideas. I'm not hearing anybody except for Rich a little bit sort of saying we don't want to have some kind of raise. And yeah, to the point of like, we do have to do it now. We can't wait until next year, because we'll know, you know, so-and-so's running and so-and-so's not. And, you know, I feel like we need to make the decision, so we're not voting for it for ourselves. We're voting for it for the next people who come in, which may be some of the same people. So I think we should plan to have a vote at the next meeting. And maybe we can talk more specifically about what those numbers should be at that meeting. I think we've talked a lot about like the other stuff and the ideals and the, you know, people's feelings about it. But maybe we can focus in on what the numbers would be at the next meeting. Katrina.
I can prepare the resolution that Mike prepared in a draft in a more formal
Okay, that would be great.
format, and then we can take it from there.
And we can talk about numbers a little more concretely. Okay, great. Thank you all. Moving through that, it is an important discussion to have, for sure. All right, saving the best for last. All right, I'm not sure even where to start. You have before you the policy on flying of flags at county buildings. We talked last month about the Ukrainian flag that we have here in Chambers. It has been just almost a year since we passed a resolution saying that we would have that up in Chambers. As I recall, last month, Maury gave us guidance that that resolution essentially will sunset on August 15th, and if we don't take any action to renew it, the flag will come down. We also talked about having a resolution to fly the flag on, well, I think maybe there was a little confusion, but my understanding was that we would fly it for another month outside, and then it would come down. So reading the flag policy, that seems maybe not quite, in my mind, like the thing that we should do. And personally, I would be in support of it just coming down on August 15th with the sunsetting of the resolution. and not trying to fly it additionally. I feel like it's been up for quite a long time. So there's that issue. There's also the issue that we have talked about that I did not find, and I don't think Katrina found in the policy anywhere, that it refers to our indoor chambers flagpoles. So that is another issue that we're not going to be able to cover in the next 10 minutes, but I think that is something that, should be added and discussed, and, how is it different flying flags in here versus elsewhere. So I guess I'd like to focus just on the question of the Ukrainian flag and what folks want to do going forward with that. So all that said, who wants to go first? Rich.
Yeah, I was going to do some homework, which I didn't do, which was Mike Sigler had raised the issue that if you're flying the U.S. flag and another nation's flag, they must be the same height. So you need 2 flagpoles, if that's correct. And I was going to check whether that was the case. I would like to do a resolution to display the Ukrainian flag on our flagpoles for a month. But I wanted to have an answer to that, and I didn't get it.
Lisa or Katrina, I mean, I feel like that was not in the flag policy, but.
I believe that it is in the flag policy about the flying of other nations' flags, that they have to be at the same height, but I'm not.
It's on page 43, Appendix A.
Right.
Okay. The third one down on the left side.
Yes.
Right, okay.
So physically, we don't have multiple flagpoles, except, I think Mike said it,
Right.
3 buildings.
Yeah, I'll
Mike.
make that point. I think we talked about it when we adopted the flag policy, that this building does not have an outdoor flagpole. It only has the indoor flagpole. The only outdoor flagpole in the whole complex is the Liberty pole on Tioga Street next to the main courthouse, which needs paint, by the way.
I would like us to fly the Ukrainian flag, but I'd like us to have the ability to do it in conformance with policy. And it seems like we're not set up right now to do that.
Mike.
So we have this opinion that the resolution we did last year expires. I think that's fine. And I think what we ought to do is Mike's suggestion is put the flag policy on the agenda and see where it needs to be tweaked in the future.
Definitely. But in terms of now and the Ukrainian flag, I mean, definitely, we can have another working group to kind of go through this. I think it would be hard to do.
But, we could put up the Ukrainian flag for another month in November, for example, or some other month here. I agree with Rich that we ought to do that pursuant to our policy, but we ought to make the policy work so that we can not violate policy.
Ann Corman, I see you.
Thanks for letting me chime in about this. Just as a reminder that the flag policy originated with WDIC, the advisory board, so just wondering if there can be some coordination as we're looking at this with that group.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. I'm happy to have them, if I think we have some specific questions. And if, we have a working group, or if that group wants to look at it, that's great. All right, I still am not sure what people want to do in terms of the Ukrainian flag. Are we taking it down on August 15th? And then potentially we could fly it at another time? Rich?
I think that's correct. I think it comes down, and it's up to some of our number to do a resolution, and in the meantime, get a facility where it can be appropriately flown. I'd consider maybe we should have some flagpoles coming off the building on the front here that we would do for this purpose. Put up 2 flagpoles coming at a diagonal out from the building and put an American flag and the Ukrainian flag for a month.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think that's a question for facilities. Lisa?
There was another, and I know you were coming to a close of this discussion, so I'm not in any way trying to reopen it, but there is another reference to other nations' flags on packet page 42, letter M. On occasion, the county may receive requests for the flag of another nation to be flown. It's recommended that only during the visit of a dignitary. This may avoid the county becoming unwillingly involved in any political issues. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. And that was the part that I had read, that, you know, I mean, I guess we can choose to become involved in political issues, but yeah, we want to be careful about what we're doing.
That may be one of the things we might need to tweak.
Yes, or tweak the policy, yes.
Yep. Greg?
I think if we're going to fly another flag for political purposes, it should come with a more significant vote of the legislature than just 50%. I know we've talked about that before, but it seems like such a dramatic statement should carry a more weighty decision-making process behind it. So maybe that's one of the tweaks that need to be made as well.
And farther down on page 42, flags may not be flown to promote political parties or support groups or organizations that are political or religious in nature. So, you know, we're trying to avoid the politics, but, you know, with some things we're getting into politics. So it's hard, it's confusing. Okay, so I think we have our answer for today. We'll follow up on giving the policy another good go through with WDIC. And let's see if there's reports from any of our staff here. I do not have a report. County Administrator, Lisa?
2 very brief items. You just received, those of you in chambers, another hard copy of the strategic plan priorities, and this one is the priorities are sorted by committee. So it's kind of a quick reference guide looking at which priorities and objectives fall into which committee's oversight or bailiwick, so to speak. So I think that was requested at the last legislature meeting by Annie Corman. So we'll be providing these for all legislators. The other quick update is we received notification yesterday that the white collar union ratified the contract. So we will be bringing forward for the Budget Capital Personnel Committee resolution for the legislature to ratify the contract at the next possible time on the calendar.
Any questions for Lisa? All right, thank you. Chief Equity and Diversity Officer Charlene Holmes is on Zoom. Hi.
Morning, everyone. Really quick update just to go back. JEDI had their first reading and discussion group, which was Foundations of Equity and Rights, and that was headed by Dr. Clark from our Human Rights Office. It went well. We had about 18 folks, 12 that stayed, 5 rotated through the 2-hour block. Our next one will be on August 20th, and we hope to see folks there. This is obviously internal to employees, but also open to the legislature. So I just want to give you guys that update.
thank you. Questions for Charlene? All right, thanks for being here. County Attorney.
I do not have a specific report.
All right. Any questions for Maury? All right, Director of Finance, Lori.
Thank you. I have a save the date. Insero will be here at BCP on August 8th, giving the complete presentation of the financial statements. So if you're interested, tune in on August 8th, BCP.
So BCP is acting as the audit committee, right? In that case, at that meeting, right?
Correct. And then there will be a shortened, abridged version. They'll come back to the ledge on 8/20.
Right.
Great. Questions for Lori? All right, thank you. Communications Director, Dominic.
I was going to give a brief update about the website design, but due to the amount of time today, I'm going to skip that and hold that for a future meeting. But that maybe could be moved up in the agenda in a future meeting if possible.
Yeah, definitely. We can give you a specific spot for it.
Great, thanks. But that's all I have.
Questions for Dominic? All right. Any committee members have anything? Mike?
I had volunteered to be the rep for PIAB.
Oh, right.
And I'm finding it very difficult to make their meetings because they hold them in the middle of the day. Nice people on there, and Dominic kind of oversees them as well. But I want to say, if you want me to continue, it's going to be hit or miss. Otherwise, someone else probably should do it.
Okay, thanks for letting us know that. I'm looking at the other committee members. Nobody's leaping out of their seats, but maybe I will talk to them individually. Well, we can let you know, Mike.
Thanks.
Lisa?
I don't like saying what I just said.
Yeah, no, I know, but we're all very busy.
Just got a late-breaking update from Ruby in Human Resources that a reminder that the state civil service visit is coming up on August 8th from 12:30 to 4:30 in the library, and there was some clarification that the date is August 8th, not the 9th.
Oh, yeah, I thought it was the 9th.
Yeah.
Okay, August 8th.
Next Thursday.
And the time?
12:30 to 4:30 at the public library.
All right. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.